The following is a HoopBall presentation.
Good morning, fantasy tragic DFS degenerates all over the world. Welcome to HoopBall's NBA DFS Today podcast. I am your host, Brenton Eckersley. I come to you live or recorded, as it is, all the way from South Australia. And over on the other side of the world, it's been a little while, David Menkoff. How are you doing over there in New York City?
Doing well. Excited to jump back on with you. Like you mentioned, it's been too long, so I'm glad we can jump into another one of our wonderful little Friday night slates.
Absolutely, man. It has been too long, and as we were just chatting off air, work's just been a little bit nuts for me. So the prices drop here, halfway through my work day. So, I have to find a balance there. Luckily, I do work from home, so that makes things a little easier. But yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be back in the driver's seat with you alongside me, mate. This is our podcast covering the 9-game NBA slate for Friday, February 26th. And just before we jump into this 9-game card, we just have to mention our presenting sponsor over there, mybookie.ag. Basically, these guys are one of the best, if not the best, rock-solid bookie platforms out there on the internet. And we don't give out advice like this without people doing the hard work and putting in the time. And we have found that MyBookie is just the best in the business. So that's who we want to talk to you guys about. If you guys are placing bets on NBA or the upcoming Major League Baseball season, you need to use MyBookie. It's just a rock solid place to put all your online betting. The only place you can trust, the one sportsbook guaranteed to give you the best lines in every sports contest that you want to have a look at. So we've got an opening offer for you. If you haven't signed up with MyBookie before, it's simple. Sign up. Enter the promo code HoopBall, that's HOOPBALL, and get your deposit matched halfway up to $1,000. Head over to MyBookie if you want to add a little excitement to the sports you love and the games you love to bet on. Bet with the best people, bet with MyBookie. Alrighty, Dave, let's get into it. 9 games. First game up here, we have Indiana Pacers traveling to Boston Celtics. It's a 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. The Celtics are favored here by 4, and the game total is at 218.5. On the injury report, Marcus Smart is still out. Romeo Langford's still out for Boston. And on the Pacers side of the ball, it is basically the usual suspects. It's Karis LeVert out still and TJ Warren still out. All the other guys are basically G League guys, so we don't have to worry about them. So not the fastest game total in the world, not the highest game total, but it should stay close. So we hope it stays close. Boston haven't been that great lately, but Indiana Pacers, Dave, I've got targets on a couple of big guys here. I'm not sure if you have anyone that you're looking at outside of those. Why don't you hit us off with the Pacers?
Yeah, definitely called it. The Pacers, this is definitely a matchup that's going to be very interesting. As you mentioned, with the Celtics, they're going to have Kemba Walker back in the defensive end. So as far as in the Pacers side, I'm going to be starting, as always, with some of the big guys. So have to start with Malcolm Brogdon, 8,100, a guy that's been pretty rock solid for the most part this season. He's coming off probably one of his worst games of the season, actually, against the Warriors, where he only put up 32 fantasy points. His price tag dropped $100. Before that game, he was putting up 55 fantasy points previous 2 games. So I love Brogdon in a bounce back opportunity against the Celtics defense. Despite of the Celtics defense, I still like him. I think he's a great mid-tier target and probably my favorite play on the Pacers side. As far as Domantas Sabonis, he's a guy that we always want to talk about on any given slate. He's pretty much matchup proof for the most part, especially against the non-existent Celtics really front line at this point. But that price tag is a bit worrisome for me. He's a guy that can put up numbers in a hurry. And as far as high price targets, he's definitely going to be one of my top picks. But that's about it. Sabonis and Brogdon are the only 2 places I'm going to go, just given the potential for a low scoring game. I'm not going to take any shots on any of the other guys on this Pacers side. What about for you?
Yeah, fair enough, man. Look, I'm slightly interested in Brogdon at 8,100. He has had a couple of nice 50-plus point games recently. Excuse me, guys. But, yeah, those are against the Timberwolves and the Bulls. So I do like to go back and just see where those points were scored. As you mentioned, I think he only had 30-odd in the last one. 8,100. Look, I just think we're going to find some guys further down the card that I like a little more than Brogdon. In the backcourt, I'd probably rather, if I was going to go here, maybe go with TJ McConnell at 5,500. It just seems like a little bit of a better option off the bench, but I can see why you may not be playing ancillary guys here for the Pacers. As far as Turner and Sabonis go, yeah, 10-4 for Sabonis. I mean, he's crushing that a lot of the time. And this is the Boston front court. So we can target Boston front court. 10-4 is a high price tag. We've got a number of guys up around this, high 9K or into the 10K salary coming up. Sabonis is definitely in play. He did just destroy Minnesota for 81 DraftKings points, so the ceiling is there and his floor is around 45. I don't mind it too much. I will have some shares of Sabonis, not too many. And Miles Turner is the only other guy that I may look at here at 6K. Look, no real ceiling with Turner. It's just a rock solid kind of play. If you land there, maybe if you want to play two centers in your lineup, with some other guys coming up, he is an option. Let's bounce over to Boston. Jaylen Brown at 8,600, Tatum at 93. Can you play either of these guys?
Normally I would say I would probably look at Jaylen Brown versus Jason Tatum, just given the price salary reduction. But the price tags are starting to get very close together at this point, so it's hard to really trust either of them, especially with Kemba Walker back in the mix. I actually prefer Kemba Walker at a significant price savings at 6,200 versus Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum in this matchup, just because he's a guy that, again, has the potential for 35, 40 fantasy points, especially against the Pacers defense. I don't expect Kemba Walker to be limited at all as far as minutes are concerned. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, again, they're going to be stealing a lot of the usage between the two of them. So it's really hard to trust either of them for me and anything other than GPPs. For me, it's just Kemba Walker on the Celtics side. No one else really I'm going to be targeting in this one. There's just not enough usage to go around. As far as centers go, Robert Williams is always in play, usually as a terrific value play. But at 4,200, his price tag has gone up a little bit. I much prefer him in the 3,000 range, just given his volatility when it comes to minutes. And that's it for me on the Celtics. Who are you really going to look at on the Celtics side at all, if any?
Yeah, if any is the thing. I'm not sure I have too much interest in the Celtics guys here. Robert Williams, only 14 minutes in the last one. And weirdly, Daniel Tice only played 11. I didn't catch that game. 11 minutes is extremely low. I don't know if he was injured or something. Do you know? Matchup thing, maybe?
No, no, it was more of a matchup situation for Daniel Tice. That's why he didn't get the minutes, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I'm either way, I'm probably not targeting any of the front court Celtics players against the Twin Towers over there in Sabonis and Turner. Kemba Walker's definitely in play. He's probably just a bit of a guy that if you happen to land there, I think he's going to just be fine. He's going to have a rock solid floor around that 30 to 35 DK points. And, Indiana backcourt defense doesn't really scare me off too much now that Oladipo's elsewhere. He's a good price. As for Tatum and Brown, yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm not sure I'm going for either of these guys at the moment. Jaylen Brown's just been kind of putting out mid-30s DK returns recently. He's had a couple of mid-40 games in there as well. But again, those games were against the Pelicans and against the Mavs, who give up a bucket load of fantasy scoring. So I'll pass on Brown, 9,300 for Tatum. It's kind of the same thing. He's got a bit of a higher upside, but only just. He's only had a couple of 50-plus point games in the last 8 outings, and Pacers are good defensively. It's a slow matchup. I think I will just pass there and move on. Let's jump into the next one. This one is the Houston Rockets traveling to visit the Toronto Raptors. I guess they are down in Florida, I think. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the Rockets here the Raptors here are favoured by 8 with a game total of 218. On the injury report, not much coming up here. Dante Exum and Kenyon Martin Jr. both out for the Rockets. Nothing to worry about there. For the Raptors, we have, I've just missed a couple of Houston guys because they are on the next page. Kevin Porter Jr. still out, Christian Wood still out. Toronto Raptors, the only thing there is Jalen Harris, who we do not have to worry about. So look, Rockets versus the Raptors, a bit of another slow kind of matchup, and not too tasty for me. Maybe a few options. What about Houston, Dave? Who do you have?
Yeah, it's tough to really look at Houston. I mean, again, it's another one of those games that potentially going to be extremely slow as far as tempo. And the Rockets just are reeling. I know they got Victor Oladipo back, and that's where I'm going to start as far as the Rockets side. I'm going to take some shots at Oladipo at 7,400 versus John Wall. I just think that, given the price salary savings, he's coming back from injury, played 32 minutes in the last game, which was a blowout. Didn't shoot particularly well, and he still put up 36 fantasy points. So at the very least, I think he's got a pretty solid floor with the potential for 40, 45 fantasy points in this type of matchup against the Raptors. So I'm going to be looking at Oladipo on the Rockets. That's pretty much it, to be honest. The only other guys I'm really looking at would probably be Eric Gordon, 6,200, a guy that certainly gets plenty of shot attempts, coming off a 24 fantasy point effort, in 34 minutes, where he didn't shoot particularly well. In fact, his last two games, he shot a 33% from the field. I look for him to turn that around pretty easily against the Raptors. And I think that price tag is at a point where it's worth taking some shots on Eric Gordon. And the front court is obviously a mess on the Houston side. Jayshawn Tate is a guy that I've been looking at in lineups up to this point. But with the Oladipo back to get a lot of the usage, I don't know if he's going to have as much of a facilitator role in this type of offense. So I'm not going to put a lot of interest in him. And that's really it. I mean, as far as centers go, Justin Patton at the bare minimum of 3,300 is worth a shot, I guess, if we're expecting a blowout. But in any case, I don't think he's going to get enough minutes to warrant any ownership whatsoever. So it's going to come down to Oladipo as my main target with a little bit of Eric Gordon sprinkled in as well. And that's it for me on the Rockets.
Bang, same as me. Yep, I pretty much agree straight down the line there. It's, a bit of a blender with Jayshawn Tate, House Jr., Eric Gordon as to who gets usage and when they get it. I prefer those three guys much, much more when one of, Depot is out or one of those guys themselves is out. You can start looking at the other guys for a little bit more usage. Out of those three, look, probably Daniel House Jr.'s a little bit jumping off the page for me at 5,100. He can have a decent night into the 30 DK point realm. 5,100 is pretty cheap for him at the moment. And as for Depot and Wall, yeah, I'm with you. It's shots at Depot at 7,400, Wall at 8,200. Love John Wall, but that's a little bit steep for me, especially when these backcourt guys are facing Kyle Lowry and Freddie VanVleet defense. Speaking of the Raptors, let's flip over to that side of the ball. Freddie VanVleet, 8,300. Lowry, 7K. That's a big price discrepancy between those two guards, and I know which one I will be looking at. I would imagine it's probably the same for you, Dave Menkoff.
Yeah, I'm hope we're on the same page here, but I'm going to go with the old wily veteran himself, Kyle Lowry.
Absolutely.
At only 7,000, that's kind of a disservice to Mr. Lowry. A guy that is coming in fresh. He played 35 minutes against the Heat, and he put up almost 50 fantasy points, and his price dropped somehow. So clearly, who's ever at DraftKings doing the pricing decided, hey, this is the perfect opportunity for a letdown performance. I disagree completely. I'm going to go Lowry 110% and not think twice about it. He's probably one of my favorite mid-tier price guards on this slate. And I much prefer him over Fred VanVleet, 8,300. Despite VanVleet's potential higher upside, I'll take the salary savings and run with it. And as far as Raptors go, it's tough with Lowry back to trust Norman Powell, 6,400. OG Anunoby is a guy that I have been putting in lineups, I have to say, in hopes that he's going to have a breakout performance. He's yet to eclipse 30 fantasy points. I don't envision it to happen in this one either. So I'm going to probably stay away from OG Anunoby. And then, as I like to mention on this podcast very often, Chris Boucher is a guy that I look at quite often as a great guy that seems to always bounce back whenever I mention him on the podcast. So I'm expecting another bounce back Chris Boucher, 35-point potential fantasy game in this game against the Rockets. Book it. I'm locking in Chris Boucher for 35 fantasy points.
Whoa. Okay, man. You are the Chris Boucher whisperer. I like it. If that's what happens when you talk about Chris Boucher, can you please keep talking about Chris Boucher? Because he's in a couple of my season-long fantasy teams and is bouncing up and down pretty badly sometimes. But look, as far as Lowry and Van Vliet go, yeah, I'm totally with you. Lowry at the cheaper savings, came straight back in on Wednesday and had a line of 24, 7 and 8 with 4 threes and 2 steals. So yeah, 7K, and he just racked up 49 DK points. So his floor is really solid. I will definitely pay that rather than paying for Freddie tonight. Yeah, OG Anunoby, I know what you mean about those breakout games. There's one coming. It's definitely coming sometime in the season. He's going to have that, game where he hits 27 actual points, and then you've got yourself a roaster. But yeah, I just can't trust that to happen. He's probably safe for cash though. I'm actually having a fairly good look here at Pascal Siakam at 7,900. On the other side of the ball, we've got PJ Tucker playing the 5 for the Rockets again. He's a pretty tough defender, but he does not scare me off when you are talking about the length and athleticism of someone like Siakam. So Jarrett Allen from Cleveland just cooked the Rockets front courts yesterday, I think it was, to the tune of 26 actual points and 18 rebounds with 2 blocks for 60 DK points plus. So, yeah, I can kind of see something similar happening for Siakam here. Boucher, 5,600, sure. I'd love to know the guy was getting minutes. Maybe you've whispered him into it. Conjured 28 to 30 minutes of Chris Boucher for us. If that's the case, 5,600 is a fantastic price. That's probably it for me on the Raptors. We can move on to the next one. Phoenix Suns at Chicago Bulls, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time again. We have the Suns favored by 5. That seems low to me, but sure. And the game total is 226. We do have some news here for Chicago. Lauri Markkanen remains out. Otto Porter Jr. remains out. That is about it. All we have to worry about for the Bulls. And for Phoenix, no one to worry about, just G League players. Look, this one's interesting. It's Suns defense. I don't like to play teams who are playing against the Knicks or the Suns. I will not be looking at too much on the Bulls roster here, but the exact opposite can be said for Phoenix when playing up against Chicago. So we have to have some interest in some Suns, I would have thought. Dave, who do you have?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Suns versus Bulls. I mean, it's certainly interesting because I have to just shout out the Suns right now is the fact that Devin Booker basically willed himself through social media back onto the roster, and rightfully so for the All-Star game. So just a quick shout out for the Suns and Devin Booker. I have him in some leagues, and I'm excited about his first All-Star appearance. But I digress. As far as the Suns go, I have to say that Chris Paul is definitely going to be in play for me against the up-tempo Bulls. 7,500 is a pretty tolerable price to pay. Notice I didn't use my word. At 50 fantasy points in his last game, his price actually dropped in this one against the Bulls. I mean, this matchup is just a guard dream, so I don't understand why they dropped his price. But nonetheless, I'm still going to put a lot of interest in Chris Paul. And then his other backcourt mate, Devin Booker, who I just mentioned, is also going to be in play quite a bit at only 8,000. I mean, that's a great salary. One of the lowest salaries you're going to get for Devin Booker this season. Coming off a 39-point effort, which he didn't really do much outside of score, which he doesn't normally do. But I fully expect him to get in the 40 to 45 fantasy point range, especially against the Bulls in an up and down type of contest. The only concern I have really is around whether this ends up being a blowout. If it stays close, both these guys should absolutely crush value. And that's pretty much it on the Suns side. I'm not going to have too much interest in DeAndre Ayton, 6,800. He's a guy that is normally in play, but he's just hasn't been able to get to that ceiling game in recent efforts. So I'm not going to have a lot of interest in Ayton. And that's pretty much it for me on the Suns side. What about you, Brenton? Who's your top pick on the Suns if you have one?
Yeah, the top pick is definitely Chris Paul at 7,500. I love Devin Booker in this matchup as well. I'll just take the salary saving for Chris Paul against this terrible Bulls backcourt defense. CP3's coming off 50, 20, 29, 56, and 48. So that's a little all over the place, but I'm sure there are probably a couple of blowouts in there on those lower nights. And that just shows you the potential that we do have for a guy who is at only 7,500. That seems craziness to me. I'm going to come back to Chris Paul at 7,500 and Kyle Lowry at 7K a lot as we go through this slate. I can see myself having shares of both of these guys very heavily. Ayton, no, 6,800. He just has not got it together this season. And while we're doing shout outs, big shout out to the guy in one of my Yahoo fantasy leagues who offered me DeAndre Ayton straight up for Karl Anthony Towns. Yeah, no. Mikal Bridges is the only guy that I might take some shares of here, and that is just due to the matchup, simple, pure. For 5,400, I don't play a lot of Mikal Bridges, but I reckon he could probably be in play here. He's got a decent enough floor of around 25 DK points, which is all we need at that salary, and he could have an upside game against the terrible Bulls. The only other notes I have here are, that potential blowout. So, I mean, Cam Johnson's been relegated to the bench and is only putting in, 15 to 18 minutes a night. But if this does get out of hand at 3,500, he may be worth a shot. Over to the Bulls. I have to say, I am not interested in Chicago tonight. I'll just keep it really short and sweet. Do you have any interest in any of the Bulls?
I actually do have some interest, but very limited, and it's limited to one name and one name only, and that's a guy that has three names, which is a theme of a lot of NBA players at this point. It's Wendell Carter Jr. He is going to be in play for me against DeAndre Ayton. I think if this game somehow stays close, he's shown consistency over his last two games. It's very hard to trust Wendell Carter Jr. I'm the first person to say that. But as someone that invested in him in season-long fantasy and in DFS very often, I like him coming off of an injury. I think he looks fresh. He looks motivated. And the Bulls are suddenly a team that is surging quite a bit. So before we know it, the Bulls are actually in the playoff picture right now. So I think that's something to look forward to. I think there's some buzz in Chicago right now around the Bulls, at least making the playoffs. So that's something to consider in this matchup, and that's why I'm going to be looking to Wendell Carter Jr. to keep it close as a double-double machine waiting to happen.
All right, man. Moving on. We can move on.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We nearly did the jinx thing. Sacramento Kings visiting the Detroit Pistons. This is an 8 p.m. Eastern Standard game. The Kings are favored here by 3, and the game total is a decent 223.5. Detroit Pistons injury report. Sadiq Bey has come up as questionable. I think he went to the locker room in the last one, but returned. Now he is questionable, and we still have a stack of guys out. Blake Griffin, Killian Hayes, Jahlil Okafor, and Delon Wright. Sacramento have not yet submitted their injury report, so we'll just jump straight into the Kings here. Versus the Detroit Pistons, could be some scoring here. What do you think about Sacramento, Dave?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. On the Kings side, it's really hard for me to really pinpoint who's going to go off. I mean, De'Aaron Fox is definitely going to be a guy that we have to start with on most nights. A guy that his price tag has actually dropped now, under 8K, which is a perfect opportunity against the Pistons backcourt of Dennis Smith Jr. I really expect him to shine in this matchup. I like De'Aaron Fox with a high ceiling type of potential game at 50 fantasy points. He's probably one of my favorite mid-tier guards. There's quite a few that we've already touched on. So it's definitely going to be an area we have to take some shots. And I think De'Aaron Fox is a perfect candidate on the Kings side. And that's where my lineup probably starts. And then as far as any other pieces on the Kings, the only other guy I'm probably looking at against this Pistons beat up front court is probably going to be Richaun Holmes, 5,900. That price tag is still huddling in that mid 5K range, slightly higher now, but I still think he has potential for 35 to 40 fantasy points. And at that price tag, especially against the Pistons, I like him quite a bit. And that's pretty much it for me on the Kings side. I'm not going to have too much interest in Buddy Hield. He just hasn't really been shining too much. Harrison Barnes, 5,500. Is going to be more of a GPP play for me, just given his price drop a little bit and given the opportunity. Halliburton, I love as a rookie. As you know, I'm a big rookie supporter, and I think Halliburton has a bright future. and he's coming off some great games recently. It's hard to really trust him in this type of matchup against the Pistons. His price tag has gone up to 6,600. But despite of the price tag increase, if this game ends up being a blowout, he might get some runs. So it's probably going to be De'Aaron Fox #1 for me, followed by Halliburton, and then finally Richaun Holmes rounding it out for me. What about you?
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, the Pistons are basically down to the lowest stocks that they can find in terms of backcourt guys. And that's not saying anything horrible about Dennis Smith Jr. or Saben Lee. But, basically they are beat up, as you said. So we can look at Sacramento guys against them at the moment. I think De'Aaron Fox at 7,700 just screams play me. It's hard to ignore De'Aaron Fox when he comes down under 8K. Having said that, we do have other guys, as we've already mentioned, CP3, Kyle Lowry. These guys are cheaper again and potential, they have the same potential kind of upside. So I also like Halliburton at 6,600 here. This is another dude around this kind of salary who can go off any night. So some shares of Tyrese Halliburton here. He's had a couple of great upside games recently, one of them being against the Bucks and the other against the Nets. And those were in his last two. So I don't mind 6,600 for Halliburton. He's getting a lot of high minutes now. I love the discount down from Fox as well, although both of them are probably in play. So I've also noted Richaun Holmes here, 5,900, probably over Marvin Bagley, 5,900, just against Miles Plumlee at the center spot for the Pistons. I think that's a pretty good price for Richaun Holmes. If he can't go for some reason, we have seen him in and out of the team a little bit lately, then maybe Marvin Bagley gets some more center minutes and I would have some more interest in playing him. And Whiteside's out, and I just won't go anywhere near trying to work out, which of the Kings centers are going to play back up. But between Bjelica and Norval, Pell and guys like that, I just leave that to other people. Okay, the Pistons. So we've already had a little chat about the backcourt situation there. We've got Dennis Smith Jr. He is listed at, I can't find him. Can't find him. Saben Lee, though. Thanks, man. 4,600 for Dennis Smith Jr. That's a pretty good price. For me, though, he is the pivot away from Saben Lee. I love this kid. He's obviously been thrown into a situation where he's getting minutes. He's getting props from his coach, Dwayne Casey, recently to, basically speaking on all the hard work he's put in the background. And, sometimes kids like this just need that opportunity. Delon Wright goes down. Someone has to step up at point guard, and this kid's been doing it nicely. 4,300. His last score of 28 DK points came in only 21 minutes. That is pretty impressive. I like Saben Lee here a little more than Dennis Smith Jr. And at the cheaper price as well. Sadiq Bey, questionable. That only means one thing, and for me, that is Svi Mykhailiuk going to suit up and start? If he is starting at 3,400, I will play Svi. It's also against the Kings, shooting guards against the Kings. Talk to Micah Potria. They give up a stack of fantasy points to shooting guards and guards in general. And this is not a play I'd usually make. I don't tend to chase, the Norm Powells and the Dante DiVincenzo's and the Svi Mykhailiuks who are just pure shooters. But 3,400, if he's given the start, I will have a go there. Jeremy Grant at 7,300 is pretty enticing as well. He should be back after resting on a back-to-back. And when he's in, he just carries this team. The Kings are the 9th fastest-paced team and the worst defensive rated team this season. So I think we have to look at Jeremy Grant here at 7,300. The ceiling just hasn't really been there for him. But, if there's a chance to get that ceiling game back in his pocket, it is against the Kings. That's probably it for me on the Pistons. How about you?
Yeah, no, that's a great call. I mean, the Pistons are definitely intriguing. This Saben Lee guy, second-round pick, you mentioned, came out of nowhere, getting minutes, getting rotation minutes, and playing fantastic, earning that praise that you mentioned from the coach, just was putting up fantastic numbers off the bench, making you really wonder what happened to Dennis Smith Jr., a former lottery pick, and now is seemingly given every opportunity in the world to start and get minutes. And this guy comes out of nowhere out of Vanderbilt and decides to start taking some of his timeshare. So it's just interesting to watch. But as far as DFS goes, I have to say Saben Lee, 4,300 is going to be my top pick. You mentioned Dennis Smith Jr., 4,600. He's definitely the pivot now. but I still prefer Saben Lee just consistently. It's hard to trust Dennis Smith Jr. Time and time again. He's shown that he's just very consistent in the NBA. And certainly a guy that we hope for the best, but hasn't proven it. So Saben Lee's number one for me. And the Pistons, you touched on it. Jeremy Grant's going to be back. He's going to be ready to go. Should be well rested. And has the opportunity to have a nice bounce back effort with 45 fantasy points, which we haven't seen in a few games. But I still think that it's certainly going to be an area that I think he's going to be able to really touch on and get to that level against the Kings front court. I don't see it too much resistance there. And then you touched on Svi Mikhailuk. That's something to monitor. If he gets minutes, and he's going to get starter minutes, 3,400 is a great price tag to pay for him. It's just so hard to trust a guy like Svi because he's a guy that's so reliant on getting his shots to fall. And that's something that we have to keep monitoring and see if he's going to get started minutes. If he does, then Svi is in play for me. But otherwise, Saben Lee and Jeremy Grant are the only places I'm going to on the Pistons side.
Cool. Totally agree. And the nice thing about Saben Lee is he's coming off the bench, so he doesn't get that little starter tag before tip-off. So it may just sway, your more casual DFS player away to Dennis Smith Jr. Oh, cheap guy getting the start. That doesn't mean he's going to outperform Saben Lee. So I like that play. Moving on to the next one, Los Angeles Clippers at Memphis Grizzlies. This is an 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. We have no game total, no spread, and we have no injury reports yet either. This will be the second half of a back-to-back, and that is two teams who are playing each other right now or played each other earlier. We just need to keep an eye on news with the back-to-back for both teams, especially on guys like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So the Clippers, no injury report submitted. I guess we just go in assuming that the Clippers studs are playing. Dave, what do you think? Can you play either of these guys? PG at 8,600, Kawhi at 9,100.
Yeah, you definitely mentioned it. It's certainly interesting because you just touched on it. It's a back-to-back against this very same Memphis team. And boy, did I get this wrong because they're coming off a game where the Grizzlies absolutely blew them out as we record this pod. So it's going to be interesting. From a Leonard and Paul George perspective, I'll probably still lean Paul George over Kawhi Leonard. I think a bounce-back game is going to be in the cards here for both guys. And I love Paul George. I think he's got potential to really explode here. 8,600. I'll take the salary savings all day, and he should be able to put up 50, 55 fantasy points, especially in a bounce-back, motivated effort. I love Paul George here. And then, again, Kawhi has a potential, but, again, we don't know if he's going to be playing the full allotment of minutes. But this game was a blowout in this last one, so I much prefer Paul George in this matchup. And then as far as any other Clippers go, it's really tough to trust anyone else, just given how much usage Paul George and Kawhi Leonard command. The only other guy I'm really going to be looking at potentially is Ivica Zubac at 4,400. He's starting to get consistent minutes off the bench, and I think he has the most potential for a double-double. And at that low salary, a guy that we can definitely take some shots on and have full confidence in. And that's pretty much it for me on the Clipper side. What about you?
I'm pretty much in exactly the same place. We won't spend too long here, I don't think. I will be looking at Paul George at 8,600. That is a nice salary saving, for a stud off of some guys coming up later who are a bit more expensive. I don't mind PG at 8,600. Kawhi, 9,100. Sure, if we know he's playing, he's in play as well. Always, these two are studs, and they are priced, fairly appropriately here, I guess. It's pretty funny that I set up this my notes here expecting a blowout, and it was a blowout. I was just expecting it the other way. 122-94 is the finishing score in that one, and it was Memphis who did the blowing out. Unbelievable. I like your call on Zubac. I would like to see him get more minutes. I think he's an excellent center. 4,400, I will pay that, knowing that we are probably going to get a little bit of increased run on the second night of a back-to-back, I would hope. Other than that, I don't have too much interest in the Clippers. Memphis Grizzlies. Who do you have here, Dave? What are your thoughts? The teams, I don't know which team is showing up any given night here for Memphis. It's beat the Clippers by 30 and then lose by 30. It's very hard to keep track of. Who do you have interest in here for the Grizzlies?
Yeah, you touched on it. It's certainly going to be difficult to trust anyone on the Grizzlies. I mean, if we look at the game where they blew out the Clippers just now, I mean, it's going to look. We're going to start with Jonas Valanciunas as a guy that we're going to be targeting. I think in the price reduction of 6,800, I think that's a great salary for Jonas Valanciunas and a time to really attack him. I don't see any reason why the Clippers are going to be able to stop him. He's a double-double machine every time he steps on the court, and I actually like him quite a bit. At 6,800, I think he's going to be solidly in play for me. And then the only guy I'm really going to be looking at is going to be Kyle Anderson, Mr. Slow-Mo, 6,200, a guy that put up 32 fantasy points just as recent as tonight, and a guy very consistent as they come, but a solid GPP option just given this matchup. And that's pretty much it. It's hard to really trust Ja Morant, a guy that, absolutely has been shining recently. Didn't play a lot of minutes, just given the blowout nature of the game against the Clippers. But he's a guy that's going to be in play. But for me, it's going to start and end for the most part with Jonas Valanciunas, and that's about it. I can't trust anyone else on the Grizzlies side, despite the blowout. What about it on your end?
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same place. We are straight down the line with each other tonight. I love it. Thinking the same kind of things, which usually means we are on the right track. Valanciunas is the only guy I'm looking at here, 6,800. The Clippers are a tough defensive team. They weren't tonight, but, usually they are, and I don't like to play guys who have to, face up against Kawhi and Paul George too much. So I am looking at Valanciunas at 6,800. That's probably where I'm starting and finishing with this Memphis team. Kyle Anderson, absolutely, solid floor, 6,200. He's not a very sexy play, and I think I'd just rather play some other guys and other guys in the fixture from other teams and Valanciunas, and that's probably it for me. So we can probably skip ahead to the next one, which is the Utah Jazz visiting Miami Heat. This is an 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game as well. No game total, no spread. And that is probably because we're waiting on a stack of fairly important injury news from the Heat. Dave, if you've heard anything that I haven't here, let me know. But Miami, questionable Bam Adebayo, questionable Tyler Hero. So that is why there is no game total or spread. Avery Bradley still out, Myers Leonard still out, and Gabe Vincent is probable. For the Utah Jazz, nobody of consequence that we have to worry about. Look, I'm not really sure I have a ton of interest here in this game. It's probably going to be fairly slow, beat down defense on both sides of the ball. We did see this matchup recently, and it wasn't good for the Heat from a fantasy perspective, and I expect this to be fairly similar. I have a couple of targets on the Heat, maybe one only. On the Jazz, sorry, maybe one only. But why don't you break down the Jazz team?
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on it. I mean, this is a game that it's tough to really understand what the game total is going to be just because of all these questionable tags. And on the Jazz side, I think it's interesting because a lot of the guys are back and healthy, and we've seen what a healthy Jazz team can do, and they've just been absolutely on a tear as soon as the calendar year turned 2021. I mean, this team can't lose at this point.
Who saw this coming, by the way? I don't know.
Unbelievable.
Maybe Utah Jazz fans out there can lie and put your hands up and say we knew this was going to happen, but I'm not sure that many of us did. So sorry, mate, to jump in there. Just keep going now.
No, you're absolutely right. They're reminiscent of the Atlanta Hawks of a few years back when they were just a solid overall team that just had no flaws. Whether it's starters or bench, any guy can just come in and score at nauseum. And that's what they've been doing at this point. So as far as the Jazz go, it's hard to trust anyone. Donovan Mitchell, 8,500 is just too expensive. Mike Conley, 6,100, just coming back from injury, is a guy that normally I'd be targeting. He's coming off a great effort against the Lakers and another blowout, which is just a theme of the Jazz at this point. And I like Conley. He's probably one of my favorite plays on the Jazz. But he's going to be more of a tournament look for me. The only other guy that I can really say that I'm going to be looking at consistently in this game is going to be Rudy Gobert at 7,200. He's probably my main target, despite some lackadaisical efforts over his last few games, which have been blowouts. If this game ends up staying close, which I hope for DFS sake, Rudy Gobert is my favorite play, followed by Conley, and that's it. I'm not going to go anywhere else, just given how deep the Jazz are, especially with all these guys back. Do you like anyone on the Jazz at all?
We have this Vulcan mind meld thing going on tonight. It is absolutely Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert for me. Rudy Gobert at 7,200. That is a play for me if Bam Adebayo sits. If Bam sits, good luck, Heat front court stopping Rudy Gobert. I think they would have to play Precious Achiuwa or someone like that. I just don't see who stops Gobert. So I like Gobert at 7,200 a lot if Bam sits, less if Bam is playing probably. Donovan Mitchell, you said it, 8,500 is too much for me for Don at the moment. And Mike Conley is the only other guy we'll look at here at 6,100. It's a great price for Mike Conley. I just worry a little bit about the Heat defense, but we do have some movement on the other side of the ball there as well. So let's swing into it. Miami Heat, I have to say I'm not interested in too many guys here if the news is that Hero and Bam both play. However, if Bam goes out, I think things really open up, and I would be very interested in having a look at Precious Achiuwa at the lowest price we can possibly get on DraftKings at 3K. He's likely to get minutes. Even if he doesn't start, he's still probably going to have to play 22 to 26 minutes, and the kid's a point per minute beast. 3K, he could absolutely crush that in 20 minutes. So I would like the look of him if Bam is out. And also Kelly Olynyk at 4,600. That's a play if Bam is out as well. He's potentially going to have to slide to the 5 maybe, and the Heat may have to play small. So there'll be more shots, there'll be more rebounds available if Bam sits. Kelly Olynyk at 4,600 is just kind of a bit of a blindfolded dart throw, I guess you could say. And again, if it's based on the news of either Bam or Hero sitting, I will then look at Jimmy Butler at 9,400. But one of those guys has to be out. If both of them are out, I think Jimmy Butler's a lock at 9,400 from a usage standpoint. His floor has been around 45 DK points. So he's only had a couple of lower games thrown in there since he stepped on the court this season, and those ones were 37 DK point returns. So, his floor is absolutely as strong as you can think of at the moment. And I just think if we see both of those guys sit, someone has to score the ball, and that is going to be Butler. That is it for me on the Heat. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's tough to trust anyone in the Heat. I mean, you touched on it. If Bam Adebayo sits, fire up Precious Achiuwa, like you mentioned, and forget about it. He's going to be as chalky as they come if we get the Bam Adebayo news. So that's something we want to monitor, especially if we're looking at differentiating lineups. I mean, that price is just so hard to pass up. If he gets 20, 25 minutes, despite of a blowout, he should get a consistent run. So I like Precious Achiuwa a lot. And then you touched on it, Jimmy Butler at 9,400 is going to be in play. That price tag is high, but someone has to get the usage on the Heat, especially if Bam sits. And Jimmy Butler has triple-double written all over him in this type of matchup. And that's it. I think we can close the book on the Heat. I'm not going to have interest in any of the other guys. Goran Dragic coming back from injury. Anyone else. Kelly Olynyk, I'm not going to have too much interest in just because he's been burning me recently in season-long fantasy. And that alone,
he'll do that.
That alone makes me just wary of putting him and trusting him in DFS lineup. So
absolutely. I hold grudges, man. I will hold grudges on dudes if they let me down and they blow a lineup for me that was looking good. I will hold that grudge probably longer than I ever should, and I reckon that's probably standard DFS thinking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so we'll slide on to the next one. Atlanta Hawks at Oklahoma City Thunder. This is another 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. The Hawks are favored by 3.5, and the game total is 223.5. We have a little bit of injury news to get through here. Atlanta Hawks, Bogdanovic is still out. Chris Dunn, DeAndre Hunter are still out, and Cam Reddish is questionable. For the OKC Thunder, Trevor Ariza, Hamidou Diallo, George Hill, Al Horford on the back-to-back, I would imagine, and Ty Jerome are all out. Other guys are G League guys we don't really need to worry about. So, Dave, this should be a fairly high-paced game, I would have thought. There's always spots that we can target against the Hawks. Who do you like for... we're going to start with the Hawks, though. Who do you like for Atlanta?
Yeah, on the Atlanta side, I mean, Trae Young, 9,900. I mean, he's just been absolutely balling recently. I mean, it's hard to fathom. Trae Young is a guy that I think, is we can safely say is an all-star snub if I've ever seen one. I know that the Hawks are terrible, but it's not his fault. He's putting up just all-star numbers all season long, and he's put up almost over 50 fantasy points every game recently over his last few. So I think that price tag is certainly in play. He's a guy that should be over 10K, and he's at 9,900. So I love him quite a bit, especially against the Thunder. He's my favorite play in this game, most likely. As we talk about the Thunder, there's some opportunities there too. But I digress. Trae Young, number one for me. And then we can take some shots on Danilo Gallinari. I know his price tag shot up to 5,000 after that just outrageous shooting effort in the last one. But only shot up $300. So I think Gallinari is going to be absolutely in play yet again at only 5,000. If he puts up 30 to 35 fantasy points, suddenly he's already hitting value and exceeding value. So I don't think he's going to make 10 threes necessarily against the Thunder, but I also think that he's going to be a guy that we're going to be looking at. He's going to be higher owned than usual, just because of that performance in the last one. But I still love Gallinari on the Hawks side, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to have too much interest in John Collins, 6,400. There's a lot of trade rumors and speculations going around. He's not getting consistent minutes in any of these games, coming off concussion-like symptoms in recent games. It's hard to really trust John Collins, despite the nice mid-tier price tag. I don't like Collins. And then same can be said about Clint Capella. We just haven't been able to see that ceiling game out of him recently. And at 7,800, I'm not going to take too many shots at a guy that's almost 8K. I'd much rather prefer to take the savings and go Gobert. And that's it for me. What about you?
Yeah, man. Look, Gallo at 5K. It's not about chasing that massive, ridiculous shooting night that he's just had, 55 DK points with 10 threes, as you said. But it's the minutes, 33 minutes or more of Danilo Gallinari at 5K is all I need to see. We still have guys out. We still have guys questionable. So monitor the news, of course. But if Danilo's going to come in off the bench and play 33 minutes, I will play him every day of the week at 5K. The guy can shoot the three like nobody's business. And he gets boards. He's a big fella. 5K is just too cheap for a dude playing that many minutes. So I like him. I'm actually going to go just away from Trae Young in this one. I just think we've got some options at point guard and shooting guard that we've already touched on. Another few coming up that just have me steering away from Trae. As you said, he's a monster at the moment. I just think I will play other guys and see if I can get on the better side of some ownership. If I'm going to target OKC, though, I do like to target them with the big men. I will play Clint Capella here. Collins, no, but Capella, yes, at 7,800. Just a few shares. It's an expensive price for Clint Capella, but this is the kind of matchup where I can see huge rebound game potential. He grabbed 16 boards against the Cavs. He grabbed 16 against Boston, 18 against the Knicks, and I can just see similar rebound numbers here coming for Clint. So if he can throw in some points for us and some defensive number, I think he might blow this salary right out of the water. Look, he's not my favorite play on the card. I just have a little shining in my eye for Clint Capella in this matchup, so I think I'll play him. Cool. I will leave the other guys alone. Rondo, Huerta. Oh, I sounded like you when I said that. I think I might have picked that up from you. I've got the Huerta name down and Cam Reddish.
Very impressive.
It was better than the old Aussie, just straight out. Kevin Huerta, no. So the point was Rondo, Huerta, Reddish. I think I'm just leaving those guys to other people. Charlotte Hornets at the Golden State Warriors. This is a late game, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It does have a decent game total of 233.5. And the Warriors...
1 second, Brendan. You just missed the Thunder.
Oh, did I? You're absolutely right. Let's go back and talk about the Thunder. Okay, you're right. I didn't have them noted down here. My apologies. Let's just click over here onto the Thunder. So we got SGA at 8-8, and we have some other guys. We also know that Al Horford is out, so Isaiah Roby's going to be, everybody's little fantasy darling for the day, 4,900. That's okay. I don't mind it. 4,900 for a guy who's going to play starters minutes. It's always enticing. I do not play Lou Dort at 4,800. He's that OG Anunoby type of guy who is going to have a 30 actual point outburst at some point, but I just can't do it at 4,800. I would still probably look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 8,800. He has to be considered in play against this Atlanta defense. It's going to be a pace-up game. We're going to have lots of fantasy scoring, so I will take shots at Shai. Again, I think we have some other guards that I like a little more, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with playing Gilgeous-Alexander here. Baisley, 5,200, has been underwhelming. I can't quite recall what he did in his last game, but yeah, not for me at the moment. And Theo Maladan at 4,500. That's a good play, especially when you're talking about a starting point guard going up against Trae Young. We talk about it every time the Hawks play. Theo Maladan at 4,500. That could be a 35 DK point night for the young man. So I will have a crack at him as well in a few lineups. Yourself, Dave, now that we're actually talking about the Thunder, who do you have interest in?
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on it. I mean, when we're talking about the Thunder, Theo Maladan is where I'm going to start at 4,500. I know he's been very consistent since he's come back from his little COVID spell, but he's a guy that can just rack up defensive numbers, and he hasn't really been able to really have that real shining game since he's gone down. I think this is a great opportunity against the Hawks to really see kind of a ceiling type of game with Theo. So I like him at 4,500, and he's going to be extremely low owned to boot. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if we're looking at tournaments and trying to differentiate your lineups. I like Theo Maladan a lot. The only other guy I'm looking at is you touched on is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 8,800. Just a couple of tries.
As soon as you don't think about it, you can get it. Well done.
100%. So he is going to be my favorite play in the Thunder. A guy that's really starting to shine and is going to be an all-star next season. Just mark your calendars. He's going to be a first-time all-star next year. No question about it. Yep.
You heard it here.
Mark it. So he's a guy coming off a 61-point effort against the Spurs. I love him. I think he's really taking the reins of the offense and showing why he's the alpha dog on this team. And he's my favorite play on the Thunder. And then the only guy I'm looking at otherwise is going to be Al Horford at 6,400. I think he definitely is a guy, brings that veteran leadership. He's also out for this game. So disregard what I just said about Al Horford.
You may need to look elsewhere. He may not bring back value if he's not playing.
Agreed. So I will be going Isaiah Roby, but 4,900 is a bit of a high price tag to pay for Roby, despite the guaranteed minutes in this game. So he's a guy that's going to be more of a GPP play versus a standalone play on that front. And that's pretty much it for me. I think we can jump right into the next one.
Perfect. Now that we've actually covered a team that is playing. The Charlotte Hornets are next up, and they take on the Golden State Warriors at Golden State. This is a 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game as well. We do have a game total. It is 233.5. As I got to before, I think, and the Warriors are favoured by 6. We have no injury report for either team, which is kind of weird because neither of these teams are playing tonight as far as I'm aware, so not sure what's going on there. Hornets, Warriors. It's probably going to be the highest game total on the card tonight, Dave, so we have to probably have some interest. Let's start with the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, no, you touched on it. With the highest game total, Charlotte Hornets versus the Warriors is going to be interesting. Some interesting storylines. LaMelo Ball, who is by far probably the favorite, almost a lock for Rookie of the Year. Ever since he's been inserted into the starting lineup, he's really shined as well. So I like LaMelo Ball quite a bit. I think he's not going to be particularly heavily owned, but he's been consistent at 41 fantasy points over his last 2. He does have a ceiling, as we've seen, of 55 fantasy points. So I expect closer to 50 fantasy points in this game against the Warriors. I think that the primetime atmosphere going up against Steph Curry will light a fire under LaMelo Ball. And I think he's going to be a great place to start. I'm not going to have a lot of interest in Terry Rozier. His backcourt bait, 8,400, is a bit too expensive to pay for Rozier, despite some of reaching the string of great performances. I don't like Rozier too much. The only other guy I'm looking at really is going to be PJ Washington, but he's going to be more of a GPP type of play, just given what he's been doing recently. I think he's definitely more GPP related. just because he's been up and down, very inconsistent recently. And as you know, my favorite game of playing the bounce back game card, and I think this is the perfect game for PJ Washington to have a bounce back 35 point effort against the Warriors, especially against the Warriors' weak front court. I love PJ Washington, and that's where my interest kind of starts and ends with the Hornets. What about you?
Yeah, fair enough, man. Look, PJ Washington, I do have noted down here, but it's only as DraftKings have Cody Zeller listed it as questionable. I'm not sure where they got that news because there is no injury report yet, but he's listed as questionable on DraftKings. So I will definitely have a lot of interest in PJ Washington at 5,400 if Zeller can't go. Yeah, I mean, the other option there is Bismack Biyombo and Yuck. Even at 3,300, if Bismack gets the start, I think I would rather just play it safe with PJ at 54. Yeah, Rozier, 8,400. That's just way out of control high for me. I'm not paying that much for Terry Rozier. He's coming off the back of 25 DK points. And before that, he had 19.2 DK points. And he gets a price bump of $500. Cool. Thanks for that, DraftKings. Pass. Yeah. Look, LaMelo Ball, what a gun. I love watching the kid play, but 8,700, that is just a little bit out of the salary range for me. I just keep coming back to the guys that we've spoken about already in Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul. I will play those guys at cheaper salaries than 8,700 for Ball. He's a gun, no doubt about it. It's a decent matchup. I just think we can do better. That is probably it for me on the Hornets as well. Let's swing across to the Warriors. Steph Curry, Hornets defense, under 10K. What is your take on playing Steph tonight?
My take is absolutely fire him up. Fire Steph Curry up with confidence. I mean, look at his recent games, and you'll see that he's a guy that's been averaging over 50 fantasy points over his last few games, and a guy that has been showing that he can get fantasy points despite shooting poorly from the field. In his last 4 games, he has yet to crack 42% from the field, which is astounding for a shooter of his caliber. So just put that in perspective. He's still averaging over 50 fantasy points despite shooting under 42% from the field. So put that recipe together and expect a huge bounce back effort. And if he shoots anywhere near 45, 46% from the field, he should exceed 60 fantasy points with ease in this matchup. So Steph Curry is my favorite play. I like him a little bit more than Trae Young even at a similar price tag. It's hard to really fade him. And then I also like Kelly Oubre as far as the front court goes, 6,800. I know that price tag is getting up there, but he's been showing a lot more consistency over his recent games. Despite the last game where he only put up 23 fantasy points, the 3 games before that he had over 40 fantasy points. So that's something to consider as we go. But Kelly Oubre is going to be more of a GBP play for me. And then the only other guy I'm looking at, it has to be Mr. Draymond Green. I don't know what got into him recently, but I could not be any happier. In my season-long fantasy leagues, I have Draymond Green in one of my big money ones. And let me tell you, it's been a revelation having a guy that can average almost a triple-double. And now that he's actually scoring for the first time all season, coming off almost triple-double with 12 points, 9 rebounds, 11 assists, I mean, $6,900 is still a very reasonable price tag for him, coming off 47-point fantasy effort. So I love Draymond Green. So it goes Curry number 1, followed by Draymond, and then distant third, Kelly Oubre, and that squares it up for me on the Warriors.
Yeah, these are the 3 guys I have written down again, Dave. We are just crushing it tonight. Look, I think Kelly Oubre is probably just starting to get a little high at 6,800. I just did want to note him as we do want some exposure to the Charlotte defense. So, look, if you're in a game stack situation, game scripting, the high game total and things like that, then sure, Oubre is absolutely in play. I don't think I'll be going too much to him outside of that game stack scenario. Draymond Green, 6,900. I love this matchup for Draymond. Absolutely. We have touched on some other big guys at around this kind of price, but I think Draymond Green is perfectly in play here. Yes, he's finally pulled his finger out and even scoring a little bit. And I have him in one of my season-long fantasy leagues as well. And it's the last thing I look at is the scoring for Draymond Green. Like that's just that's just cream on top. If he hits some points, great. It's the steals, it's the blocks, it's the rebounds, it's the assists. 6,900, he's in a great place here, especially if Cody Zeller is out. If Cody Zeller can't go, Draymond is going to walk into value there, no problems. Steph Curry versus the Hornets. I don't think we need to touch on it too much longer. This is a guy who is still shooting over 20 shot attempts a game. He's still playing 36 minutes every game. He, as you mentioned, he's not shot over 40% in any of those last 4 games. So everything is adding up to Super Steph tonight. I like him as the probably the number one high price guy on this game card. And yes, we are going to get to Portland and Lakers next. I like Steph Curry more than those 2 studs that we're going to touch on right now. Portland Trailblazers at Los Angeles Lakers. It is a 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. The Lakers are favored by 4.5. And Trailblazers, the game total is 220.5. As you can imagine, we have some injury news on both sides here. Anthony Davis is out. LeBron James is probable. He's playing. Kyle Kuzma is probable. He's probably playing. Markieff Morris is probable. And Dennis Schroeder is probable. That's a lot of probables. It's a weird word to say that many times in a row. And over on the Portland side of the ball, Zach Collins, Harry Giles, CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, the usual suspects. Lillard versus the Lakers. Mr. Menkoff, can you play him at 10-1?
I mean, it's hard not to play Lillard on most slates, just given the usage that he's been gathering recently. Against the Lakers, especially the Lakers are coming off an absolute blowout against the Jazz. So I think the Lakers are going to be more motivated. But I also think on the flip side, on the Trailblazers side, I think Damian Lillard is going to have another 55-point effort just because he gets so much usage, like I mentioned, especially with CJ McCollum out and it continues to remain out. I think Lillard is going to be the alpha dog. And again, this is going to be a nice matchup for him going up against LeBron. I think he's going to be extremely motivated. And I think he's going to be able to put up a nice ceiling type of game. And the price tag is also almost at 10,000 even. So I'm going to have interest in him. Not as much as you mentioned, also an alignment as not as much as Steph Curry, but I'm still going to have Damian Lillard interest as well. It's going to be more of a tournament play for me, just given the matchup against the Lakers. And then as far as the Blazers go, the only other guy I'm really looking at on the Blazers side, it would have to be Derrick Jones Jr. at 5,200 is a guy that we can look at just because he's a guy that can get steals, blocks, do a little bit of everything. Coming off a 31-point fantasy effort, against the Nuggets. I think this is a great opportunity for another type of 35-point effort. The price tag did jump a little bit, so he might be more of a GBP type of play just given the price tag. But despite of all that, he's my second favorite play on the Blazers side, and that's it for me on the Blazers.
Yeah, cool. I was looking at Derrick Jones Jr. at 5,200 as well. He's found himself to be a fairly consistent and safe floor kind of DFS guy at the moment. You know, he scores around 30 to 34 DK points, 5,200. That's not a bad price. If you just fall there, I'm not going out of my way to plug him into lineups first or anything. But if you've got 5,200 left over and you fall into Derrick Jones Jr. at small forward, sure, no problems. Covington at 6K is kind of that guy as well. He has had a salary decrease of $400. I don't mind him at 6K with no Anthony Davis on the defensive end. And just keep in mind that Rocco missed all 5 of his shot attempts in the last one. So don't just read a fantasy score and just dismiss him immediately. I think he's fairly solidly in play for cash at 6K. Lillard 10-1. Yeah, it's just fine. I mean, as you said, he's just soaking up all the usage that one player can possibly take on one team. And I think it's an absolutely fine play. He's probably going to blow that salary value, and blow it out of the water. I just like Curry a little bit more. We get a $400 saving that may come in handy elsewhere. Who knows? I like Lillard as a pivot probably off of Curry and some of the other guys that we have been talking about. I mean, it's so hard to ignore this guy. Returns of 54, 66, 79, 61, and 57. That's his last. That's 5 out of his last 6 fantasy games. So yeah, counting him out completely is just something that you can never do. Los Angeles Lakers 10-7 for LeBron. I'm not sure that I am paying that, Dave. I just think I like other guys that we've already spoken about much more. I am worried about what the Lakers are actually, how the Lakers are performing at the moment. Normally with AD out, you just go to LBJ. He only played 26 minutes, I think, in the last one and only put up 30-odd fantasy points. So I can't trust LeBron at the moment. The only other guy that I would be even slightly considering would be Kyle Kuzma, and that 6,300 salary is not fantastic. It's better than the last one we saw at 6,700, but it's only mild interest on Kuzma, maybe some low shares of LeBron as pivots away from the other high guys. I guess I'm just not sold on many Lakers here. Dennis Schroeder. So Schroeder is questionable. I guess that brings up whoever the Lakers decide to start at point guard, whether it's Alex Caruso at 3,700 or somebody else. It might be Wes Matthews that they slide into the lineup. I won't play Matthews if he starts, but I will play Caruso at 3,700 versus Dame Lillard defense. That's probably worth a bottom of the barrel blindfolded dart throw. What about yourself on the Lakers here, Dave? Can you play LBJ, and do you have interest in anybody else?
Yeah, the Lakers are tough. I mean, we saw them shake up their lineup recently. And I have to say, on the Lakers side, it's going to be interesting. LeBron is definitely a guy that I'm not going to be looking at. You know, he's a guy that I've been fading for the most part this entire DFS season, and I'm going to continue to do so with some level of confidence as well. Despite of his MVP numbers, I just don't see him having just enough to carry this team with all of their injuries and the injuries that are piling up for the Lakers. I think they're in real trouble, and something that we have to monitor as we get into the heart of the season. So I'm not going to play LeBron. The guy I'm looking at actually is the other small forward in this game is Taylon Horton Tucker. If he gets starters minutes again, he's priced only 3,600, which is just a great value. He played 30 minutes, shot 3 of 12 in the last one against the Jazz, and had 21 fantasy points. If he makes some jump shots and is able to facilitate, which we've seen in the preseason, I love Taylon Horton Tucker in a starting role. I think he's going to be heavily owned, but for good reason. And I think he's my favorite play in the Lakers. Despite the matchup, I think he's going to be absolutely in play for me. And that's really it for me. I guess the only other guy I'm looking at, sorry, I forgot to mention, is Markieff Morris. If he starts as well, 3,100, a guy that can score, can get some rebounds, coming off a 20-minute effort where he did put up 24 fantasy points. I like him a bit as well. If he starts again. So it all comes down to starters minutes, and that pretty much sums up the Lakers for me.
Perfect, man. I think we're done. I think we're wrapped up. I think we've covered every team, every game, every possible way you could look at DFS tonight. I want to thank you, Dave. It's good to be back on here with you, man. I know it's getting late over there, so we will let you and the good people out of here. But before we go, you can go find David Mankoff on Twitter at DMank33. That's DMENK33. You can find myself at Terrain72. So that's TERRAIN72. And also, guys, before you close your podcast app, just drop us a quick rate and review if you can. Give us a thumbs up. Give us 5 stars. You know we appreciate it. It helps us with our sponsors and also just feeling good about ourselves. Won't keep you much longer, guys. Dave, take us out. Who's your favourite play on the slate tonight?
Favorite play is Stephen Curry
Absolutely.
himself. And what about you?
Yeah, no, it can't go past Steph. I still keep swinging back to Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry. I will have some shares of all 3 of those guys. Thanks a lot, man. You have a good one over there. We'll catch up with you next week. And all you guys out there in DFS land, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. This has been HoopBall's DFS Today. We are smashing daily NBA fantasy with you.
This has been a HoopBall presentation.